So we're moving into the second session now. So I suppose the first session was very much about looking at what are the connections within our systems, within our countries, and then starting to think about the connections beyond. So I suppose thinking about, our own health system within our nation, and then comparing with what's happening in other health systems. But I think it's also quite useful to move beyond health and think about the broader system that we operate in and how other people think about systems. And I suppose the other thing that occurs to me is how important the whole concept of sustainability is. Sustainability in terms of healthcare. So yes, we've been talking about collective leadership for improving quality, improving performance, improving safety. But one of the biggest challenges for all of our health systems is how to sustain, what is needed in healthcare, given the constraint we have in terms of resources and manpower, womanpower, and capability. So sustainability is a key question for healthcare, but it's also a key question for the world, which is, I suppose, my way of starting to introduce our keynote speaker for today. And normally we have a keynote speaker at the beginning of the session, but I think it's worked out quite nicely to really hear a little bit about each other's work, and we'll continue that in terms of looking at the work of Scotland and England in the afternoon session. But we're delighted to have Dr Petra Kuenkel here as the keynote speaker today. And just, I suppose, to tell you a little bit about Petra before I hand over to her. So Petra's background is in change management, organisational psychology, and political science. And Petra is the Executive Director of the Collective Leadership Institute, which is just coming up there on the screen behind me, which is a non-profit organisation based in Potsdam, Germany, but you also have an office in Cape Town, I think, second office in Cape Town. And I've come across Petra's work quite accidentally, I think it would be fair to say, and when we first started talking, I know, Petra, you were surprised and interested that collective leadership might actually be something that would work in healthcare. Such a hierarchical, bureaucratic system. The notion of introducing collective leadership, I think you thought I was mad initially. So Petra's work is beyond healthcare, I suppose, and a lot of what Petra has been focused on is sustainability in terms of sustainability of the planet and the sustainable development goals, and doing a lot of international work with multi-stakeholder groups, really trying to bring people together to think collectively about these major challenges that the world is facing, or that humanity is facing in terms of sustainability of the planet. But Petra's also been doing some work in Eastern Europe with healthcare systems. But I think it's fair to say your work spreads right across different sectors and domains and at different levels. And what Petra is going to talk to us about today are, I suppose, some of the developments that have been taking place in terms of the Collective Leadership Institute over the last several years, particularly the Collective Leadership Compass, which is a guiding compass, I suppose, in terms of how you do collective leadership, but also the dialogic change model, which is another useful tool. I was fortunate enough to attend one of Petra's courses in the Collective Leadership Institute a couple of weeks ago. We had been in touch, obviously, before that to organise Petra's coming to this event, but when I attended that, I thought, yes, this is the right keynote for us, because Petra will certainly challenge your thinking beyond healthcare, but I think really bring a very fresh and different perspective to what we're used to, and also I think different language, which is also helpful, because often in healthcare we can get kind of stuck in what we know and what we feel comfortable with. So I'm delighted to introduce Petra, who's going to speak as a keynote, but then stay on and do some workshopping with us as well into the afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, very honored to be here. It's like coming home. I haven't heard so much about collective leadership in like 1.5 hours. And I find a lot of words that I'm using. And for me it's really exciting. And Amy is really absolutely right. I said healthcare, these are the most hierarchical systems. And I'm also an organizational development consultant, or used to be. Today I do different things. And the one rule was absolutely clear: don't even go to try and change hospitals. It's not going to work. And you know what is worse? Universities. So Great. I would like to. Oh, wow, I need this.
Sorry?
This. I would like to say just a little bit about the Collective Leadership Institute. Founded in 2005 at a time where collective leadership was not on the agenda, particularly not in Germany, neither the term collective nor the term leadership. And interesting enough, a lot has changed since then. So there is something about a mindset shift that is growing. We're still all working on a mindset shift, but you probably also feel it is happening. And when I listened to your presentations, I definitely thought, there is something happening. What's quite interesting, just to contextualize, because Alice already said this, we, as a Collective Leadership Institute, we are not the experts in health or in vocational training or in peace or in anything. We're working globally. We're a relatively small organization with 15 people. We are the experts in getting people into a spirit of collective leadership. We do this as an NGO a lot with, we call it capacity building. It's not really leadership development. In the context that we work with, the term leadership development is reserved, for a very specific courses. We do capacity development. We always catch people where they are. I've also heard this in the presentation. Go there where the people are with their challenges. This is extremely important. And that could be peace development in Sri Lanka. That could be decentralized health systems in Ukraine. There could be vocational training in Egypt. That could be climate change adaptation in Morocco. Name it. And what we do with about now around 4,500 alumni is getting them into a methodology that they can use. We call our courses the art of collaboration, the art of leading collectively. But we are very careful with the term collective leadership, because my experience is collective leadership is not just a concept. It is about a transformation of a system. And that is probably something that resonates with you. It is also a way of dealing with complexity that is more responsive to improvement, that is more agile, because we need that, and that takes the people with, because in the end, I believe it is human agency that can make a difference in the world, and certainly in health, because it's all about people. So, when I start, I don't know if you can see that, what is on this picture. Can somebody identify this? It's a bit far away.
Deer.
Giraffe.
Deer. Deer.
Giraffe.
Deer. Swimming. I live in the northern German countryside. I was sitting on a jetty, this is a small lake. I was sitting on a jetty and I had an umbrella because it had been raining. And I was just sitting there and kind of waiting for the rain to stop. And there suddenly something was swimming in the lake. And then I looked closely and said, I can't believe it. Deer. And you know what was so amazing? They seemed to be talking with each other. So the atmosphere that I got across from this little picture was fun. They were having fun. I mean, they could have walked around the lake, but they wanted to swim. So I want you to stay a little bit with the fun. Because when I read the documents and when I listened, I thought, in an atmosphere, in a health system, in a hospital, where there is a spirit of collective leadership, it must be fun to work there. So that is at the core of, I think, what we do around collective leadership. But it's not a fun that is just kind of partying. So it is a fun that is related to the human connection. It is a fun that is related to the contribution to people, to the situation, to the improvement. It is a fun of achieving something together. So that climate is adding a very, very important component that I would like to get across here, and that is collective leadership contributes to the vitality of the system. It contributes to my individual vitality. because it's fun to work with people in a spirit of collective leadership. But it's also contributing to the vitality of a hospital, of a team, of kind of a collaborative group of people across hospitals. And it should finally contribute to the vitality of the societal system. And there are lots of words around that you've been using, like well-being. You know, that is a term that is also increasingly being picked up. So I just want to remind us, at the core of collective leadership is that we create a vitality in systems. So let me take you on a little bit of a journey. I'm going to take you to Africa, far away from the northern countryside. Take you to Africa. I have worked in Zimbabwe, and what amazed me was the clash when I worked in Zimbabwe, that was beginning of the 90s, between the very linear approach to development, you know, that was taking place, and a culture that was anchored in a very, very different worldview, where mountains would speak, where trees would speak, where, you know, the spirit mediums were negotiating the health between the bigger system and the community and the individual. So in Zimbabwe, they taught me a very, very important lesson that's a Zimbabwean proverb. And this is very directly related to what we wanted to do there, you know, in development. You can't force a tree to grow. You can do a lot. You can cultivate the soil, you can kind of take care, you can protect it from the sun, you can protect it from animals, you can kind of put some fertilizer, etc. But you have to prepare the ground and you have to take care of that tree. You can't force it to grow. It grows by itself. I think this is an important aspect of what we do in collective leadership, because we are creating the conditions for something to emerge, rather than pushing people now into a new concept. I'll take you to West Africa, to Senegal, where I've been working, although my French is like rather absent. The Senegalese taught me a proverb that probably all of you know by now, because it has made its way into Europe. If you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel together. So that's another aspect. It means an acknowledgement of the relational interaction between people that might not always be easy. And collective leadership is not about harmony, but that might be stabilizing a situation that takes people into a more sustainable future that in the end benefits all. So follow me, let's jump over the ocean to the United States. And I would like to introduce you to a lady that has passed away at the age of 100 in a couple of days. There are revolutionaries in the United States, and she was one. Her name is Grace Lee Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs is Chinese by origin, but she was very active in the black community in the United States. She wrote a book at the age of 95 that was a future-looking book, as if she now needs to get active for the next 50 years. So she was radiating vitality. And I've never met her, but I've met two people in the Club of Rome, where I'm a member, that actually know her and have worked with her. Grace Lee Boggs said, and that really impressed me, the new paradigm is about creating systems that bring out the best in each of us. I thought, wow, this is a sentence that describes what we do when we try to introduce collective leadership, whether we can use the name or not. But it is also looking at the systems, the interaction systems, the way we structure things, and asking, what are these structures and systems doing to the individuals? And I don't know much about the health system in your countries, although I'm getting more and more pressed, because the German health system is suffering. It's a very different approach, but it's suffering from having created systems that dehumanize people. I've just said to Edith this morning, you know, when I go to my general practitioner, I am my blood count. Nothing else. Just exaggerating. But only exaggerating a little bit. So what are the systems that we need to create and bring out the best in each of us? And that's what we do. Butts travelled from Detroit, you know, where Grace Boggs lived, to New York. There is a very, very impressive architect, Christopher Alexander. Christopher Alexander, I think, was a rebel in architecture for a long time, and he had been kind of ignored. Anybody knows Christopher Alexander? If you deal with collective leadership, please read Christopher Alexander. It's totally fascinating. He never, ever talked about collective leadership. But what he did, he said, we must understand that the degree of life in a system, in any structure, in any living structure, be it architectural space, be it landscape, be it the body, be it human communities, the degree of life in a particular system is created. He didn't say co-created, but today he probably would say co-created by the mutually supportive living centers this system contains. Now it gets a bit theoretical, but I'm just repeating this because it's important. So the degree of life, and in the beginning I spoke about vitality, about aliveness in a system, is dependent on the living centers that are in a relational interaction and in a mutual support. They create the degree of life. And he has written 6 books about how we could understand better what creates aliveness in a system and what does not create aliveness. And I'll take you back to Germany, to Berlin actually. There's a biologist with the name of Andreas Weber. I think he doesn't know Grace Boggs, he hasn't lived in Zimbabwe, and I do think he has never mentioned Christopher Alexander. So our world is pretty fragmented, although people think in a similar direction. Andreas Weber is a biologist, but he's also a systems scientist, and very much trained by Francesco Varela. I don't know if you've ever come across the Chilean kind of Umberto Maturana and Francesco Varela, very, very inspiring cognition theorists. Andreas Weber said, if you look closely and study biology, you discover that life is on the constant emergence of new life. So the sense of aliveness is something that we as human beings share with nature. We share with animals. So, and that is so important because if we talk about health and health system, it is about how can we create the conditions for aliveness to emerge? How can we create a relational interaction between people in a way that they feel more alive individually, but also the system feels more alive, because if the system is more alive, it delivers better. And that's your, as I said, as I understood the experience that you have from the collective leadership approaches that you have been running. So what is important is that when we think and introduce and live collective leadership in action, what we actually do, we contribute to the healing of the individual and the healing of the system. So in health, we are like varied with that approach of alignment. So let me tell you a little bit about my history. I'm a political scientist and a psychologist, and I'm really working in very difficult multi-stakeholder initiatives, etc. But I started off studying medicine. I did this for 3 years, and I was totally fascinated by physiology, by biochemistry. And then I stopped. Why did I stop? I was so depressed and getting so desperate, because the moment I had to do my hospitations in hospital, I discovered that people were called the kidney in room 3. You probably know that. And I just couldn't identify. I couldn't identify with patients being reduced to objects. And I was very desperate. I talked to my father. My father is a professor of neurology. My mother is a doctor. My sister is a doctor. So it was very difficult, in a doctor family to get out of being a doctor. But I thought, this is the symptom of something. I need to go for where the origins are that actually determine the symptoms. So in that way, I went to psychology, political science, went into organizational development, institutional development. And honestly, it's all about healing systems. And now I'm in the International Club of Rome, looking at climate change and looking at biodiversity loss and looking at resource depletion, etc. It is all about healing systems. And our health systems are a mirror of what we do with the world. But they're also a good starting point. And that's why I feel I'm coming home to family here. So let me just take you into a little bit of theory behind collective leadership, or behind, I introduced that, the collective leadership compass that we developed. And the little bit of theory is that I've been working in a lot of international and local multi-stakeholder processes. And what I've discovered, I could be developing of coffee standards, that's looking at deforestation in the world, that's looking at climate change, adaptation, that's looking at water resource management, kind of name it. And what I discovered is that people did not notice why things were successful in their collaboration processes and why they failed. And interesting enough, they always attached it to people. And, said, Joe, I've done a fantastic facilitation. And that was right. But then I never asked, what did she do in order for that to happen? They thought it was you. And even if the facilitators would say, no, it's not us, we're just creating a structure. We're creating a space, and in that space, something is happening. I thought, okay, we need to look at what are the conditions that need to be created for something to happen. So I developed a kind of compass around what you can do, because, the world sometimes works in checklists and kind of meta-level guidance, and the only challenge is, in our complex world, when we want to do transformations in systems, we need to have complex models, because they need to mirror the complexity, but they shouldn't be too complex so people don't understand it. So that was the challenge. I then went further and thought, I have been so inspired by the system theory reading that I've been doing with many, many people, that there must be something that needs to be learned about systems aliveness at the core of collective leadership, across all these knowledges of people. And I discovered the following, and I hold on to kind of very complicated terms. And I discovered the following. The one thing, and that was in biology, resilience, system theory, cognition theory, consciousness theory, etc. And I discovered the following. The first thing is life has a tendency, as I said, to recreate life. So wherever you go, and you're working in the health system, there is a potential to regenerate aliveness equals health. So that's a core element of a live system. So if we translate this into the human systems that we work in our hospitals, health systems, institutions in the world, etc., we need to look at what invigorates that sense of wanting to regenerate and co-create a better future. Get back to health in the system. So I call this intentional generativity. That's important. Then I looked at, kind of also coming, with my medical background, and looked at, life is ordered. So we do have structures, and we do have systems and smaller systems that are related, and we do have cells in the bodies, and we have a liver and a kidney, and we have boundaries around certain elements. So life requires a certain degree of permeable containment. And that containment is so absolutely important. If you work with hospitals or kind of cross-institutional actors on collective leadership, people need to have a sense of belonging to a team or a department or a project, and it is extremely important to have that sense of belonging. If we neglect that, and I'm not talking about Europe at the moment, if we neglect the lower level sense of belonging, and the big system is too far away, people can't identify. So it is a feature of that we have to take care of smaller and larger identities, and how the smaller identities are embedded in the larger identities, but not creating a trade-off, between a sense and an urge for belonging. So that was permeable containment. The third is that life always creates something new. I mean, like, we're sitting here, and some people say, we are at the top of the evolutionary development. We don't know. I think we still need to give evidence, that we create an area of the Anthropocene, that is responsible enough. So I think we have to give evidence to that. But what is absolutely important is life always creates new life and novelty and different things and tries out. There is a huge creativity around life. So if we look at collective leadership and in a sense of creating an aliveness, we need to tap into people's creative urge. People want to do something new. If we say, just improve the quality of what is, we're not getting their spirit going. So that is extremely important. And the next point is that life is connected. So for all of you sitting here, when you're dealing with collective leadership, you're probably belonging to the thinkers that actually say the world is like the body, everything is interconnected. But you also know that every health system I know, no, it's not true. There are some traditional health systems, and the Chinese medicine is quite different. But many, many Western health systems kind of categorize the body. And I don't know if you have the same problem in your countries, but if I go to a internal medicine practitioner, I can't talk about my depression because he's not interested. He's just checking my liver or whatever. So we have this tendency to compartmentalize. And I'm not saying this is wrong, because this got us a huge knowledge. So can we please acknowledge that, use it, and go back to understanding that the world is interconnected, our bodies are interconnected, we are a product of our society is a product of us, so it's all interrelated. So I call this contextual interconnectedness, because not everything is connected to everything, it's connected in context. But the contexts are connected. And that is a very, very important element that we need to look at when we introduce collective leadership. What are the connections that we need to create that aren't there to get people over silos? But how we also kind of keep containment, so that's not kind of not everybody with everybody. We had a little chat this morning talking about structures. This is where I say structures are important. But if structures kind of devitalize us, it doesn't make a difference. So the next point on my discovery journey into system theory was mutually enhancing wholeness. So it means that we need to accept that we're not just nested, because nested is almost a bit of a hierarchy, but we're nested, but they're all also parallel nested systems in the world. And there's a constant negotiation between the interest of the whole and the interest of the individual, or the smaller system and the larger system. But it's not about a trade-off. And we know very well that the crisis in our health system is a crisis of society, and it's a crisis of the world. So you're dealing with a symptom when you're operating in health. On the other hand, it's an opportunity. Maybe, while we heal people, we can also contribute to healing the world. And the last element that I thought was fascinating, and those of you who are maybe having a medical background, you probably know the term proprioception. Does it ring a bell? Not at all? Okay, so you're not doctors. Anyway, so proprioception actually means, that's difficult because I'm not really kind of an expert on that. But what it basically means is that you notice while you do. So our brain functions in a way that it anticipates already a thought that says kind of lift your arm. And now it notices that, the muscles have lifted the arm and, I can also bring it down. And proprioception is at the core of how we function in our body. But somehow, if it comes to our brain and our awareness, like we act instead of reflect and act, or like learn to reflect in action. And I noticed this is very much part of what you've been trying to introduce in collective leadership, finding a way of reflecting an action. So I discovered these 6 principles and put them, and you can say this was a bit deliberate, behind a model, or as said, this is a model that came from the multi-stakeholder initiative practice, and these are 6 principles that we're looking at, what creates vitality. And this was following the root saying that the core of collective leadership is creating aliveness in systems, making systems more alive. And before I go into this collective leadership conference, I would like to throw the question back at you in the group and say, remember a situation where you experienced collective leadership in action. Could be in a professional environment, could be in your private environment. Remember a situation. How did it feel? What were the conditions? What were the conditions that helped emerge it? Because at the core of what we do in introducing collective leadership is creating a space for a spirit of collective leadership to emerge, rather than introducing a leadership concept and say, you should do that, you should do this, collaborate, or lead collectively. It doesn't work. But it's about consciously creating a space in which collective leadership can emerge and equipping people with the capacity to introduce that space and these conditions in their own professional environment. So, can you just chit-chat for just a couple of minutes? Think about a situation when you experienced and what were the conditions. Just a quick shot at the tables. Conditions. If you could just name a few things, starting maybe with that table. Conditions that created an atmosphere of collective leadership.
We have freedom,
Freedom and
permissive.
Permissive.
A sort of like a kind of license to
license
be
to
creative.
act.
We have trust and
Trust.
psychological safety.
Psychological safety.
And removing the boundaries and the barriers and everybody starting from the same place.
Yeah. Also kind of common ground.
We all have permission and maybe doing things differently, I suppose, and creating the space.
Okay. So doing things differently.
And examples, I suppose, also for collective
leadership is an active thing, not a passive thing.
Yeah. So it's not about leaning back.
No, it is active.
I think it doesn't always feel comfortable to start with, as people are looking for traditional forms of leadership.
Yeah.
And so it's how you hold that space where people trust in the discomfort.
Exactly. And you're hitting the point. The context in which we work as the Collective Leadership Institute are often very, very hierarchical contexts. There is no chance, and HR is not involved because they usually they're convinced already. Yeah. So, but there is no chance to address leadership issues. We often operate from a context of collaboration. Yeah, because people now understand, somehow we need to collaborate. Yeah, so. Well, what we did, we developed a compass. And the interesting thing, the compass is a meta-level guide that helps people, that gives a kind of rational, a kind of rational approach to saying, if we want to do some change management, improvement processes, performance improvement, changing a situation, creating a better water system, etc. It's good if we follow a certain, I'm just exaggerating, procedure. And now the compass kind of brings in a meta-level guide that helps them address the issues that create systems aliveness without them getting through all the scientific background that I've just mentioned. And quite interesting, we have one dimension, and that's the dimension of future possibilities. That's related to intentional generativity, you're kind of really wanting to change the future, and tapping into people's capacity and desire to collectively shape the future. And that works in water resource management, and it works in very different, also in health systems. It is important to bring in future orientation and really look at what are the things that need to change. Vision development, etc. There are many approaches, models, etc. It is about really addressing empowerment. There could be at different levels, in very hierarchical contexts. You can push it a little bit in the background, but you let people speak, listening, and asking the question, who needs to have a voice in this? Kind of in terms of different stakeholders is important. It is also important to talk about decisiveness. Accountability, plans, monitoring, evaluation is important. So you see what we did. We brought the more soft issues together with the hard issues. So the next is related to permanent containment, and that is engagement. There was a lot about staff engagement processes, like co-production, co-development, etc. This is all under the dimension of engagement. And it focuses on, do we get the processes right? So we do a lot of teaching on, if you want to do a change process, don't just rush into it and don't do it top down, but do it in a way that there's an engagement process, that you understand the context, that you build a good container, etc. So it's really like building the system. Remember the tree, that you can't force to grow, you prepare the ground. But it's also about connectivity and say, are we staying in our silos, or do we need to work across ministries? Do we need to work across institutions? Do we need to go into partnerships? What is enhancing the system? And don't make it too complex, but like little steps of overcoming silos is important. And it's about collective action, because our experience is, and I, was very much also the collective leadership and action here that I saw, is when people experience that a collaboration has led to a better result, even if it was a small one, they stay in it, they continue to do it. So that's the dimension of engagement. The novelty is related to innovation. So it's tapping into people's desire to let's do things differently. Yes? And there it is about creating room for creativity. And all of you that are in HR or leadership development know, there are ways, different approaches, small approaches. Sometimes it's just a small exercise that gets people into creativity. Sometimes it's really creating a space for an entire design thinking workshop or an innovation lab or whatever. So there are various ways of doing it, but just thinking about what's the innovative aspect that we need. But innovation also is related to excellence, and I've heard a lot excellence is. People need to have a desire for mastery. They need to, I always think about my sister, of course, Dr. Family is a pediatrician, and it drives her mad when people aren't correct and really good in the way they diagnose. She is like, she's got this ethic, of like really being a good doctor. That is extremely important. And agility, because, this little movie, showed, you need to be able, to quickly change and adapt to the situation. So the next part is, and that's related to the interconnectedness, is collective intelligence. And also in your presentations, there's a lot about dialogue processes, about getting people into conversations with each other. It is about creating a space for diversity, and it's not just gender or race or whatever, but it is about views, as you were showing the team, the co-creation team, deliberately a very diverse team. And it is about creating deliberate structures for iterative learning, because we have lost our learning capabilities in some of our institutional systems, because it's not permitted. So that is the area of collective intelligence. And then related to wholeness is the capability of really operating with a view of the context. I'm saying this because I'm operating or kind of supporting projects so many times that have a very, very narrow view, that don't look at what are other people doing in the field, or what are elements that we never thought about that are important, or what are the trends in my field or in my community, in my area, that I need to look at. So that context analysis can sometimes also be research, or feasibility studies, or really getting down to looking at the larger system and how it interacts, with whatever unit we want to change. It is about creating a culture of mutual support. If there works between people, it starts to work between teams, it starts then to work between departments, and then it starts to work between institutions. But it requires practice. And you get the spirit of collective leadership. A good indication that you probably all have experienced is when people say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, and why don't we do this, and I can connect you to so-and-so, and I can contribute this. Then it's life, This is the liveness of a system. And it is about tapping into the individual the kind of sense of contribution, the desire to make a difference. But it is about revising and looking at the contribution of a ward, of a hospital, of an institution, of a health system. That's all our work on vision, mission. But it shouldn't be bureaucratized, we need a vision. So, be really asking what is our contextual contribution to a certain improvement of situation, our contribution to society, etc. And the last is, the last is looking at the dimensions of humanity and the proprioceptive consciousness, the awareness, our ability to reflect in action is so much related to our ability to be human. And many of our societal systems and institutional systems, including the health system, are kind of dehumanized. You probably understand what I mean. So we need to, this is about compassionate leadership. You need to bring back the human being, the human connection. It's about mindfulness, and not everybody needs to meditate for mindfulness because it's helpful, but there are other ways of doing that. There's also a way of collective mindfulness and reflection. It is about balance. So that could be overwork or whatever. That could be not only attending to one type of medicine, but integrating other medicines. So it's always about looking, what are the different elements that we need to bring together. And it is about empathy. It is about being able to put myself in the shoes of a doctor or a nurse or a patient or but being able, having that not this blockage, but the ability to step into the shoes of somebody else. So that is ending up being a compass. That is a kind of guidance. It needs to be it needs to be adjusted to a situation. And what I would like to do you, and what I would like you to do now, just take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I think we'll have that time. This will stay on the wall. I hope it's not too far away, but I think between the two screens you can see that. Also you can get up. And take your flip charts again and pick a dimension. And in order to not get us into trouble, that you all pick humanity, is it okay if I allocate the dimensions to the tables? Yeah? Okay. So you're lucky. You start with humanity. Is that okay? And can we have engagement there? So, can we have innovation at this table? Can we have collective intelligence at this table? And then we need one table on wholeness. Anybody who would like to get up and go to that table for just a couple of 10 minutes and deal with wholeness. Is that okay? Yeah? So the middle table is going to be wholeness. And take your flip charts and write down a word cloud, what it means from your point of view. Kind of tailor it to your understanding. You can get inspired by the 3 elements for each. But if you think there are other things that are important for humanity, please write it down. To create not more than 1 flip chart, not kind of 2 or 3 or whatever. Just chat at the table and write down the most important elements that belong to humanity, or the different dimensions. Okay, 10 minutes. Did I mention on your flip chart? Just so that we can recognize it. With engagement? Okay. I would be very pleased if one of you could just get up, hold it up. We may not be able to read everything, but just kind of read through the word cloud so that we get a bit of a feeling of what it is.
So maybe in this corner.
Can we see that? Humanity. Came up with loads of words. Art by Susie. So we took the first 3 of the compass, empathy, balance, mindfulness, but then we talked about bravery and taking risks, being authentic and real, showing some vulnerability. There's something here about love, really important, and we also talked about being responsible as a human, but also in a reciprocal relationship, that it's not one-sided. We talked about compassion and caring, actually breathing and not rushing into things and just taking the time to consider where we are. And then we moved into fun, energy and freedom and feeling free. So they were our main words.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Engagement.
Sorry.
Okay, safe to say we went quite big picture to start with. So we talked about it being mutually beneficial. We talked about influence and motivation. And we also had a few discussions about whether it was viewed through the lens of being engagement as a process or whether it's a freedom. And we talked about the gap between intentions and the intention of leaders to engage with their workforce versus the experience of people who may feel that they are recipients of that rather than part of a conversation. We talked about it being the centre of any change process or not when it's not going well. That sense of feeling valued and therefore you're proud and enthusiastic, and the care that's taken to have the right kinds of conversations with people. I think that probably covers that.
Thanks a lot. Shall we move to innovation?
Okay, so ours innovation, and we started with the whole issue about actually having the time and the space, and most importantly the permission, and the ability to try to do things differently. But then within that context, we talked about some of the constraints associated with it in terms of the red tape, the governance, the agility, and in terms of how we start then to systemize innovation and organise it and put governance structures all around it. We talked about the need, the support, again around the culture, safe to fail, remove blame, but we also talked about creative people. And Will, would you want to share your analogy around the children?
Well, I just said that basically we tend to, when you think about creativity, you think children and young people are probably the most creative people, but suddenly we tend to destroy that when we get through adulthood and teenage. So what do we do to people? So we actually need to get back to, I think, childlike behaviour where people can be creative, innovative, have fun again, because we sometimes seem to destroy that, and we need to really learn to unlock that. I mean, Joan talked about people not feeling creative, and I said, but what have we done to make people feel that they're not creative? Because as a child, you're probably the most creative person around.
So that's it, really.
Thank you. Let's talk to collective intelligence.
Yeah, I've tried very badly to link all the words, but I kind of went a little bit awry. We talked about every story counting, that we have to be receptive to meaningful conversation, inclusive, embracing diversity, building on experience. Greater came up quite a lot, greater concepts, greater wholes. We have to listen and celebrating views, different views, seeking consensus, welcoming differences, making sure that everything's authentic. That I think we said the sum was greater than the whole, and that you have to check back with people to make sure that that you're understanding correctly and not putting your own spin on things. So there needs to be a constant checking back.
Thank you.
We're left with wholeness, and a funny word is wholeness, because the word cloud didn't just tumble onto the page, you had to think about it. And maybe that's to do with personal experience, and I know we're all in health systems, so maybe that tells us a little bit of the story. So we felt when we thought about it that wholeness needed us to really listen, really hear, listen and listen hard. It's about uniting and finding connections, and some of that is around having a common purpose or a common good that's outside or out with ourselves, and we need to focus on collective impact, collectively linking to the whole. It requires partnership in the truest way, and caring and compassion certainly seem to feature big in terms of how you can connect or be whole. And then equality, because I suppose what we felt was that wholeness and the language around wholeness is quite important, because it means different things to different people, and that's no less or no more than the whole. So equality in that is, and then there's a physical movement of pulling and pushing to create a whole as well. It just doesn't, I suppose, organically happen.
I would like to pick up a few things. I don't know if some of you just now thought, yeah, but there are overlaps. Now, my encouragement, because I know this, is to hold the fact that there are overlaps. Because, in one way you're right. Petra should have defined the categories in a way that they are mutually exclusive. And in a way, no, because life isn't like that. So if you're interested kind of to look deeper into the compass and work with the compass, then it's important, number one, to hold that fact that there aren't fixed categories, because all of these 6 dimensions are married to each other. This is almost a little bit more of a marriage than the typical model where there are factors contributing. But it's not too different. Also some of the factors that we work with are mutually contributing to something. So my encouragement: hold the ambiguity, of You know, but listening also belongs to collective intelligence, and yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, and you will find when you start working with a compass, you will find situations where you can only implicitly work with a compass because it's too complicated to explain it to people. But you can use it as a kind of meta guidance and say, because the rule is all dimensions need to be addressed in order to create a spirit of collective leadership as resembling aliveness of the system. And that doesn't mean, again, a rational mind said, yes, but then 100 could get kind of divided by 6 is like, help me, 15 point something percent. No, this is not the issue. It's not about, like, all needs to be exactly equal. But like, if we run workshops, if we design change processes, if you look at the improvement process, if we look at quality improvement, etc., whatever we do, it needs to be able to address the different and sometimes there is a situation where we can only bring in a little dose of innovation, because in that context it's not possible to do more. But then think about this little, let's not leave out innovation. What's the little thing that we can bring in? There are situations where you need to use different entry points. Not every situation in a system that we would like to improve or change or whatever it is possible to look at all the dimensions at the same time. Some, we have been working in southern Tunisia, in a province where there were IS attacks, and it was about getting the government to collaborate with the farmers on water resource management in a conflict-ridden environment where they hated each other, and the government didn't want to go out in the countryside because the farmers would throw stones. So it took about a year of listening to both sides without getting them into one room. So that's an entry point. So see it as, what's the entry point that I need? Sometimes humanity is the entry point. In many beginning of change processes, humanity is an entry point. And then you can do humanity and engagement. And then all the other dimensions, need to be in kind of homeopathic doses. They may come to full, kind of application at a later stage. So that is important. I just wanted to get this across. And I would like to end with a quote, because you said love in humanity. Anybody who knows Teilhard de Chardin, I hope I've pronounced this right. Anybody knows him? He said something that accompanied me for a really long time and still is. Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit philosopher, very religious person, who was kind of expelled by the ministry, kind of the religious ministry, mm-hmm. because he was just too much of a rebel, but they somehow allowed him, they didn't want to publish his work, etc., and then he traveled the world, so he got, an insight into very different, and that was last century, before, kind of 18th century. And he said the following sentence: one day, humankind will have discovered the power of love. And then, for the second time, they will have discovered the fire. And I thought this is an amazing sentence that shows where we are at humankind, where you really need to discover the power of love. And that is at the core of aliveness and at the core of collective leadership. So with that, I think it's about time to go for lunch. We have a workshop continuing afterwards. I do have little workbooks. We would like to then get a little bit more rational and kind of work on the questions that were put in the program. And I'm inviting you I mean, not slavishly doing it, but I'm inviting you kind of to, I've allocated the questions to the compass dimensions to kind of discuss the questions and find recommendations, and at the same time take it from the entry point of one of the dimensions. If you also want to address other dimensions, that's fine, but just take it as an entry point, and it's all in the workbook that you can also take home. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.